Good morning, and welcome to the Rainbow Space Magic Con. I'm Belinda McBride, and I'm the first reading this morning. I apologize for the dog barking in the background, but it's 9 o'clock and they've all been fed and they're happy and playful and they hear me out at the other side of the house. I'm going to do a reading from my science fiction, space opera romance, An Uncommon Horror. This book had been out of print. It went back into publication briefly at a publisher that I'm not with, so I took back the rights and I'm just getting ready to re-release the book. For those of you that have read it before, it does have new material, and this morning I'm going to read a little bit of the new material. For those of you that are new to the book or the series, this is basically a story of a king who has been lost during an invasion on their planet. His former bodyguard and former lover has located him enslaved on an alien planet, and they're now traveling back to their planet. So this book is really more about their journey. The later books deal more with the politics of power and so on and so forth. And this scene takes place on a space station, and it's a fight scene. This is from Helios' point of view. He'd left me behind. Griffin had ordered me to my cabin and left me behind. Fury struck me in the gut, and my gut struck back, twisting in pain. Pressure rose in my head, warping my eyesight. In a flash, lassitude rolled over me in a soothing wave. I breathed deeply, imagining myself at the edge of the ocean outside the royal palace, the soft light of the moon illuminating the foaming edge of the water as it caressed my feet. But now that water was toxic and that city gone, and my heart again burned with anger. He'd left me behind. I lay on my back in the bunk, battling the fucking hardware in my brain. Every time I resisted its pull, I paid in pain. So I stopped resisting. I accepted its limits and counted the seconds and then the minutes. When I counted 15 minutes, I was able to rise and stand. I inhaled, tasting the metallic recycled oxygen, exhaling more than I dragged in. Finally, I'd calmed enough to take a step and then another, until I left our room and walked back to the small gym. I looked around, seeing my reflection on all sides. I saw Pasha, a weak slave. I saw the slave who'd gamed the artificial restraints and survived. I saw Helios, who had a future. I walked to the wall where weapons were displayed and reached, gently lifting down the curved golden kilij. I watched my reflection as I swung the blade, feeling its weight and balance. Griffin said to stay behind, I told the reflection, but he hasn't returned. Thus, Griffin is in need of my help. I nodded, seeing the reflected images nod as well. If Griffin is in trouble, he cannot change the order he gave. He cannot call for help. That seemed logical enough. I checked the reaction of my body to that statement. Therefore, I must go help Griffin. I started for the door, coming up short as the chip reacted, slowing me before I could leave. I breathed again, tamping down my agitation. I looked into the gray eyes of the Helios closest to me. Griffin needs me. I turned to the next reflection. He isn't here to rescind his command, the big bastard. Thus, I must serve him by seeking out and saving him. Wrong. I bit my lip, seeking the right words to convince that tiny conditioned center of my brain. I took a step toward the door, feeling my limbs grow heavy. I staggered, leaning against the mirror. I looked into gray eyes. If he dies, it will be my fault. The weariness lifted slightly. If he's dead, I cannot serve him. Oh, the chip like that. I straightened, still gazing at my reflection. It is my duty to serve Griffin. I was so going to kill him when this whole thing was over. I tightened my grip on the kilij and left the gym, through the winding corridors and out onto the dock, sealing the Aida behind me. I took cautious steps, walking slowly through the docks, my limbs weak and heavy, muttering the litany as I walked. It is my duty to serve Griffin. If he dies, it will be my fault. I rolled my eyes at the idiocy of the damned mantra. Hell if I'd walk through the halls of the station dragging a sword and mumbling like a madman. I straightened, pulling back my shoulders, dropping my chin slightly. I glanced around watchfully, shivering at the sensation that I wasn't alone. There were probably cameras, but I couldn't do anything about those. I could focus only on setting one foot in front of the other. More than once I stopped, looking back over my shoulder, the urge to return to the Aida almost more powerful than I could bear. There was a tickle at my nose. I touched and my fingers came away smeared with blood. That couldn't be good. The answer here wasn't to fight through the pain, to crash through it like a bull into the conditioning and Griffin's command. I needed to trick the chip, to fulfill Griffin's command another way. He told me to go back to the cabin and rest. Well, I'd done that. I'd rested. He told me to stay behind. It had been his wish, not his command. I felt a smile pulling at my lips. I gave a small laugh. You didn't command me, Griffin. And I know you felt like shit forcing me to stay behind because you hate ordering me around. I laughed out loud and continued forward. I wasn't fully up to speed, but I could walk, I could see, and I didn't seem to be leaking blood from any other orifices. I looked up, blinked at the blurry images of signs on the walls, signs directing the traveler to specific berths, to engineering, to check-in and administration, signs pointing the way to the closest bank of elevators. I headed that direction, my eyes watering from strain and fatigue. I heard the clanging of machinery or perhaps freight being offloaded. I heard muted shouts and workers and Carlotta? Oh shit. I broke into a run, feeling weights on my legs and hammering in my head. Down the corridor, I spotted a scene of chaos, bodies scattered about, blood spattered on the walls, and a knot of people engaged in battle. Stray energy shots scarred the walls and metal scraped and clanged, sparking as blades struck the walls. Griffin, I shouted, sprinting forward, all discomfort fleeing my limbs. He was under attack. I drove my way into the crowd, slashing, stabbing, kicking, and punching. I saw his eye widen as I left a bloody line across the float. I saw his eye widen as I left a bloody line across the throat of a fighter to his right, his blind side. Without thought, I positioned myself to that side, covering him as the attackers fought with greater fury. Leave one alive, Carlotta snapped, and I pulled my blade from the abdomen of the short, muscular human male. Too late. Not my job, I growled, parrying a knife blade that came sneaking toward my face. You're the bodyguard. She cursed and spun into a kick, taking down another human, one she could keep alive if she so wished. They're gonna have station guards down here soon, she replied. Finish up. Griffin grunted a nonverbal reply, and I turned slightly, my heart freezing at the sight of blood. He'd taken more than one strike. Blood ran freely down his dark trousers, dripping from the leather of his boots. My distraction cost me, and I felt a sharp kiss of pain, a sensation I recognized and yet had no memory of. A long red streak opened along my right arm, and it went numb, so I switched hands, remotely bemused to realize I was proficient with both hands. I lunged at a large female fighter, humanoid but far taller and broader than even Griffin. In Amware? She tried to sweep me off my feet, and I jumped, kicking low, knocking her to her knees. She fell hard and cursed, her wicked long blade slipping from her hand. I landed, ducked a blow with my left, and swung the attack onto the woman, sending them both skidding across the floor. My heart raced and my skin prickled with sweat. For the first time in my memory, I fought. I embraced the violence and the blood. As long as Griffin was at my side, I fought without tiring. I struck at my enemy with just enough fear in my heart to keep me alive and sharp. I wasn't a priest or a king or a father or a lover. I was a warrior. And that will be it for now.
My name is Alex Washoe, and I am a non-binary writer. I live in Seattle, and I have two books actually in print, both of which are Westerns with a transgender character. What I'm reading today is from a work in progress. It's called A Pink Carnation in a Pickup Truck, and it's a queer time travel story. Just a little bit of background so it makes sense. Taylor is a 21st century non-binary person whose grandparent, Olive, was born in a time, Olive is also transgender, but she was born in a time when there was no acceptance for that, and she didn't come out until very late in her life, and as a result had a very difficult, painful life. And after her death, Taylor steals a time travel device and goes back in time to the 80s to attempt to redirect her life. So this is 1987, and Olive is still Oliver, and still thinking of herself as male because she has no other categories to work with. So in this scene, Taylor has crashed Oliver's Dungeons and Dragons game, and as another ploy to try to get close to Oliver. And I think that's enough background. So Gemma and the others helped me roll up a character. The basic game was the same as I remembered, but this older version was simpler in some ways and more complicated than others. I was just about finished when Oliver came back with an armload of snacks. What the party needs most is more healing, the cleric said. Gemma was looking over my shoulder. Strength, wisdom, charisma, make a great paladin. Insufferable busybodies who think they're better than everybody else, Oliver grumbled. Sounds about right. For once, I understood her ire. This was her territory, and she was obviously more comfortable here than anywhere else, which meant she could be more herself. Me being here threatened that safety and probably made her feel self-conscious again. It was scorched of me to just invade like this, but I was running out of ideas on how to breach her defenses, and I was irritable about other things too. A little hacking and slashing on monsters sounded nice. When everyone was around the table again, Gemma introduced me. Oliver's cousin Taylor. Taylor's not a girl, Oliver said. Gemma stuck out her lips. No? Can't be a dude, the cleric laughed. She's wearing a skirt and makeup. Works for David Bowie, the barbarian grinned. Taylor's not a boy either, Oliver said. Taylor is a they. They, the barbarian asked, like a split personality? Like not a boy, not a girl. Taylor is gender neutral. I prefer to think of myself as gender chaotic, I said. Gemma laughed. Grody, the barbarian nodded. I still don't get it, the cleric insisted. You're a boy or a girl. What other choices are there? You got something underneath. You can deal with half-orcs and gelatinous cubes and beholders, Oliver growled. You can deal with my non-binary cousin. Her voice was irritated, but in her own grumpy way, she was sticking up for me. It made me think of my Olive, and I felt a lump in my throat. Be it so decreed, Gemma said with a note of finality. Taylor is they. As you're leaving the dungeon, you see a figure in scale mail riding a white horse approach. There is a cross on their shield. Whatever you do, don't let them in your house, Oliver muttered. Her moment of protectiveness apparently had passed. Yo, Paladin, the barbarian called. What's your business here? I'm headed to the next village over, I said, feeding them the backstory Gemma and I concocted. There have been reports of undead activity. They took me in. By consensus, I was assigned to the front of the party. Oliver's robe faded off into the shadows, and she curled in her chair, arms around her legs, and watched silently. A different aspect from the bombastic teen I'd experienced so far. I could almost sense someone I knew raising her head from behind a screen. The barbarian brought up the rear, with the cleric in the middle. We rode into a little village. Looks totally deserted, Gemma said. Oliver scowled. It's a trap. We went building to building and found no one. I was enjoying the banter among the players and actually doing something with Oliver again, or doing something for the first time, or whatever. The last building left was the inn. It's a small place, Gemma said, just a room with a cold fireplace at one end, a short bar, and stairs leading up. You see 3 people near the fireplace. I let them see me, Oliver said. We heard you're having problems around here. They turned. You see blank, vacant eyes, drooling mouths, Gemma said. Ghouls. Frack, Oliver swore. Cleric, Paladin, can you turn them? Gemma skipped down to the end of the table and whispered, rolled dice. By the way, you hear the cleric scream from outside. Why are you always lagging behind? The barbarian yelled. I rushed to help. I raised my holy symbol and command them to flee, I said. Gemma threw dice. 2 of them turned, but 1 keeps coming. And at the same time, 3 more shuffle out from the kitchen. Can I turn those? They were included in your first roll, Gemma said. If they didn't turn, you can't try again. She turned her attention for a second to the fight going on outside, then bounded back to our end, directing it all. Fall back, I told Oliver, up the stairs. That's crazy. I can get past them. You'll get killed. I grabbed the rogue and run for the stairs. Put me down, Oliver said. What the hell are you doing? Saving you. I don't need to be saved. I stabbed the paladin in the leg. Gemma paused, widened her eyes at Oliver. You do what? Not enough to hurt them, just enough to get them to let go. Gemma consulted her dice, chuckled, rolled again. The paladin drops you, you hit the stairs on your bottom, bounce over the side and fall. You land hard enough to stun you. The ghouls close in. Why are you so stubborn? I yelled. Why can't you let people make their own decisions? One of the ghouls claws you, Gemma said. You take 4 points of damage. Make a saving throw versus paralysis. Scorch it. I leap off the stairs into the middle of the ghouls and start swinging. You're just making me a target, Oliver said. I can blend into the shadows and fade away. You can't spend your whole life hiding. I cleave one of the ghouls with a critical hit. Sometimes you have to stand and fight. That day is not today, Oliver said. Gemma hurried down to the other end. The cleric is down, the barbarian called. Paladin, we need healing. Oliver was throwing daggers with both hands, pretty accurately too. I had an advantage over the ghouls because they were evil, but there were too many. Make a dexterity roll, Gemma told me. I rolled a natural 1. You slip in the gore from the chopped up ghouls and fall to one knee. Forget the knives, Oliver said. I use the paladin as a springboard into the air and start hurling flasks of holy water. Gemma giggled, rolled. The ghouls burst into flames, and the ones around them shy away. You stepped on me, I said. And where does a rogue get holy water? I stole it from the cleric. Now get out there and save someone who needs it. That's the end of the scene. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Heather O'Malley. I am a transgender writer who has written a lot online in both fan fiction and original stuff. Not that difficult to hunt down. I also have a book, 300 Reigns, published through Doppler Press. And they have a large number of things. Their catalog is kind of interesting if you like transgender fiction. This story that I'll be reading from, 300 Reigns, is the story of a man by the name of Jeff Greenfielder. He is a professor of anthropology at Rutgers University, and he has just discovered a brand new tribe in the Amazon. He's very excited. It's a career-defining move, except something happened. He partook of a ritual, and he doesn't remember what happened. And the recording devices they had recording the event shut down. So they don't know what happened, and he was deposited to everyone else, and the tribe said, "We will see you in 300 reigns." And the tribe vanished. So Jeff's been dealing with all of this weirdness, and he's finding his body is starting to transform from male to female, and he has no clue as to why. He has sent some of the recordings to a colleague of his, Deborah, who is a professor of ethnolinguistics down in São Paulo University in Brazil. And he's waiting to hear back while he's trying to let everyone know what's going on. And so the big mystery of 300 Reigns is dealing with what the hell happened during that ritual and why the hell is he going on. And in case you haven't figured it out, the science part of this science fiction is anthropology, and it's hard science anthropology, because I've never really seen that before, and I thought that would be a neat thing to do. So, on to the reading from 300 Rains. His office hours were fairly dull, with only a couple of students coming in to ask about their papers. He helped them easily enough, sending them off to the library with a list of possible sources to look at. That made the students happy, and they kind of lost that deer in the headlights look they often had with first papers. He noticed a new email arrived when he glanced at the screen from Deborah. He opened it quickly and took a look, hoping for good news. Jeff, the language of the tribe is similar to the Panoan family, connected but not exactly to the Matses dialect. Since you know that, I can imagine you were able to work it out fairly well. I think they might be from a language group that was thought to be extinct, which is the only thing I can think of, as it seems similar to Pauruskind in several ways. As for the other language, it's nowhere in the Pano-Tacoan language group or in Quechua. I'm still trying to narrow it down, as you were right. It does sound familiar. But that's all I have for you now. Deborah. Jeff slumped back into his chair, tired of all this bullshit. Everything he turned to gave him no solutions, and in fact tended to raise more questions rather than less. That the language was originally thought of to be extinct, or at least a derivation of one of the extinct languages of the region, did not help all that much in the overall scheme of things. He grumbled in irritation. He had managed to speak with the chief and to everyone else just fine, and it was similar enough to Matses that he had no problem. This all seemed to hinge on whatever he had said in the language that no one could identify. How had he done that? As he pondered that, staring at the bookshelf next to his desk, there was a knock at the door. He looked up and spotted Alan, his graduate student, standing there. You wanted to see me? Jeff sighed and had the same conversation for the third time that day, relating his current medical condition. Alan simply nodded when he got the information. Well, I guess that makes some sort of sense, given everything we found in that vomit and clay that covered you. And after listening to the tape, I wonder just what it is you said that set them off. Same here, but I have someone working on that right now. I am hoping we will get some answers and can move on from there. I was just wondering about how I could have said anything in a language I don't know, but they did? Questioned Jeff, amazed that Alan had almost no response to being told his advisor was turning into a woman. He looked at his usual nonplussed self. Alan sat there, pondering, and then finally said, if I remember correctly, there's a phenomenon called drawing down the moon. It's a neo-pagan practice where the deity is brought down to the priest or priestess, and they talk through them. Maybe what happened is something like that. Maybe they thought they were talking to Birambo, the benevolent Earth Mother, similar to what the Matses believe? Jeff sat there lost in thought for a moment, going over the possible implications. Maybe. I mean, that does make sense. It would be similar to what Bloomberg talked about in her article on the mythic framework of the Matses. Didn't they speak of the mother a lot, like some sort of near mythic figure? Alan nodded, thinking back to the trip. I think they did. That might be a way to approach this. If they were working off the immersion with nature rather than separation from it, then you speaking as the voice of Birambo, or whatever the mother's name is, would certainly give them pause. And based on everything we saw, with how devout they are, they would absolutely do anything if their mother asked. That could very well be it, but that almost implies I asked for this, commented Jeff, a touch worried. To the best of his self-knowledge, he would never have requested that this happen to him. I'm not sure of that, Jeff. If you remember, you were pretty stoned at that point on whatever the base hallucinogenic mix they use to have their future voyages is. That means you might have been picking up on something from them rather than speaking from your subconscious. There was no sign they were as warlike as other regional tribes, so maybe they use this ritual as a way for the tribe to grow closer? If it pulls in the whole community, could that have triggered something? Alan was obviously thinking on his feet, having given enough prodding to move forward with his ideas. Could be. That might explain why the chief and I were the only two to take the voyage, and why they seemed to get upset after I said whatever I said. If I interfered with a simple ritual, then that could explain how upset they got. I just wish I knew what the specifics of the whole thing are. Jeff was taking notes on what they were generating, making sure they did not lose any ideas that might work out well in their write-up for the tribe. Alan rubbed his forehead and thought, eyes narrowed. He looked up and asked, could it be what they do instead of eco-cannibalism? Jeff paused in his train of thought and ran that idea over and over in his head to get a feel for it. It was a fairly radical notion, after all. I don't know. I mean, what would they gain by turning the leader of a group they just met into a woman? And that would also wouldn't explain why they got upset over what I said, whatever I said. Well, the whole ceremony is nothing like eco-cannibalism. It is honestly a different ritual format for the region. This is new, and what they did to me really is different. And new in this context is not helpful. Alan also paused in his thoughts. Oh, okay, I can see that. Maybe this whole situation is simply a mistake brought about because of that trance and their perception of what you babbled. Maybe what you did was so atypical from their own trance experiences that it freaked them out a little. God, I hope so, but I have no idea if there's a cure for this. I may be stuck turning into a woman if we can't find some way to fix this. The doctors have no clue about what to do with me, and their ideas, like with hormones and such, haven't worked. There is nothing our medicine can do in order to stop this, and that's kind of terrifying, Jeff grumbled. Hey, at least the tribe wasn't like the Korubo and tried to attack us and kill us all. Funai lost what, 7 representatives to that tribe in their first encounters? These people are not all that bad, considering. I think turning into a woman might be preferable to be turned into people jerky, tossed back Alan, chuckling a little as he smirked. An excellent point right there. It could always have been worse. Oh, that reminds me, how is your write-up on the tribe going? Jeff changed the subject as they were getting nowhere with this line of thought, simply spinning their wheels. Not bad. I was thinking of checking a few things with Peter Gorman before I finished, since he has more experience with the Matses. I'm making something of a cultural comparison in my write-up, since they seem to have a similar language base. There are more than a few cultural similarities, primarily being the lack of whiskers. Jeff nodded, pleased by the approach that Alan was taking. It was a good approach. Well, I can help you get that one published, as it would work well at contrasting my straightforward analysis of the tribe. We can send them both out at the same time, and maybe we'll get in the same issue, which I will request, primarily, as one work would balance out the other. Okay, Jeff. Well, I need to get back to that so I can finish my edit. I can get it to you by the end of the week. Alan stood and headed out. Thank you for telling me all that, Jeff. It won't change a thing between us, just so you know. Jeff sat there after Alan left, pondering what could be the implications for such a ritual to exist in a tribe. Despite the fact that they were shocked by what he had said, they seemed to have all the ingredients on hand for what had been done to him. In addition, that was similar to the forward time journeys of the Matses, where they seemed to be able to have a fairly accurate glimpse into the future. Maybe the ritual format was similar to the reason sex changes happened in nature because of a need for more females in the tribe. However, that didn't make sense either, as there had been plenty of females in the tribe that they had seen. If anything, there seemed to be a few more females than males overall. There had to be a reason. Something like that did not exist in a vacuum. Jeff was plagued with questions and had a dearth of answers. He packed up and headed home, depressed at the lack of progress that had been made towards finding him a cure. Thank you. That'll do for now. I hope that helped. That was a fun read.
That was awesome. Heather, there's a Q&A question for you.
Yes. I guess it's what the hell is eco-cannibalism?
Can you open your Q&A box, or do you want me to read it?
Let's see. Are the Matses a real people / language? I wasn't quite clear on all the language group names you were mentioning, except for Quechua. Yes, the Matses are a actual tribe in the Amazon. I did a lot of research for this, and one of the things that the Matses are known for is they put whiskers through their cheeks. So they consider it a way to bring themselves closer to nature. And so yes, all the language groups, all the language families I mentioned are actual tribal languages in the region of the Amazon that this story is set. Let's see. Oh, yes, and how did I come to decide on hard science anthropology? One of the things about anthropology is its whole thing is to study and figure out different cultures. And sometimes some of the cultures we meet on Earth are more alien than some of the alien cultures people have come up with. So I thought, well, what if they encounter a tribe in the Amazon, because we keep finding new tribes in the Amazon to this day. I think the most recent discovery was 2 years ago of a brand new tribe that had never had human encounters. So, and I thought, okay, well, given the fact that you have this new tribe and we're able to analyze the languages, aspects of the culture, all that, you have other things like ethnobotany, which is the cultural use of the various plants in the region that, and with the diversity in the Amazon, it could really be pretty wild. How would something like that affect people? And so by sticking to very hard, very precise anthropological analyses and actual real world theories, including actual articles, like Peter Gorman is an actual expert on the Matses, and Bloomberg actually wrote an article on the mythic framework of the Matses worldview. By using this and by keeping it very grounded in precise science, that it actually rose the level of magic and fantasy by keeping it grounded in the here and now, because nothing I mentioned is actually unobtainable except perhaps the biological mix, but since we don't know a lot of ethnobotany in some of the regions, it's still a possibility. Is anthropology considered a hard science? If you ask anthropologists, the answer is yes. If you ask physicists, they kind of stare at you like, are you high? Anthropology has a lot more, is very grounded in precise observations of people. And so I would say, I think it can be a hard science if you approach it using the scientific theory and all of these things. And yes, anthropologists call it a social science. It's a way to soften the blow for some people.
I was a cultural anthropology minor in college. That was my minor. And the university I went to, there is literally a hard science that goes through scientific method, which is the forensic osteology. That was, you know, one of the big things in my university. And I was over on the other side with the cultural telling, you know, reading and telling and listening to stories, going out and interviewing people and just sitting and listening, and then, you know, writing up observations. It's a fascinating field though, and we need it. We need more of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to do the physical aspect of, hey, let's measure a skull and think about aspects like that. But cultural analysis is extremely important, because tools like that are going to help us when we encounter alien races eventually. And ethno-linguistic studies is very important to this. As for Susanna's question here about if I had a sensitivity reader, I couldn't, that wasn't really a thing when I initially wrote the story. I didn't really see a lot of it. And the biggest aspect for a sensitivity reader would be in terms of finding someone who was from an Amazonian tribe to get their analysis of, did I represent the tribe well? As for the sensitivity readers for the transgender aspect, well, there was me. I'm kind of sensitive to transgender issues. But also I did have a number of other trans readers read the story as it developed. Yes, someone of indigenous or mixed indigenous from Central or South America would have been good. I worked very hard to treat the culture with a great deal of respect, to treat all those cultures with respect, because I've met very few anthropologists who just blithely, you know, say, oh, they're just primitives. Oh, they, you know, they actually try to, you know, approach them as, hey, these are really smart people in their environment. And so I had Jeff and all of his students approach the tribes as, these are people who are experts in their field, which is, you know, the Amazon. And I figured that was one way to approach it, so I didn't mythologize them or treat them as if they were less than something. So those were good questions. Thank you.
I think there was a question for me there about Dungeons and Dragons. I played like 24/7 through my teen years. I mean, I lived playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then I didn't play for many years, and I've just recently come back to playing on a more regular basis. So it is definitely something that I have a lot of experience with. Yes.
I'm gonna, I also played Dungeons and Dragons a lot as a kid and as a teen, and still play now. I'm running a game, you know, twice a week right now, because people have some time.
Yes.
What stories we're working on? Let's see. I have a story about a transgender veteran who, after he gets blown ass over tea kettle in Iraq, realizes he's trans, and about his transformation and going from being military to being a civilian in Tennessee. That one's kind of fun. It's partially based off of my own life and partially based off of the lives of a number of other trans veterans I know. But that's mostly hopefully getting published soon, hopefully. The other story I'm working is I wanted to take the idea of Hermione Luna fan fiction, and get paid for it. So I have a really focused, person who's into words and defined meanings, and another person who's a bit more spacey and into sculpture and art, and about them getting together, and it's fun. It's called The Finder of Words.
I'm working on a sequel to a urban fantasy featuring Greek gods, and the first one was the 10th Muse about Eros and his muse Reese. The one I'm working on right now is Eros' half-brother Hermaphroditus, and Hermaphroditus is kind of a little known in the pantheon, and yet we know Hermaphroditus through his name. And so I'm working on that, and my other project, I was thinking about it because of, talking about sensitivity readers. It's actually about a Civil War veteran who is half Muskogee, but is very, very acculturated to New Orleans. And so he's in London. It's post-Civil War. He's in London. He gets caught up in a Jack the Ripper scenario that since he's one of the suspects, he's investigating it himself. And it's paranormal. He could be mentally ill, or it could be paranormal. So I was thinking about the sensitivity readers because my source for Muskogee culture had a stroke not long ago. And so I set the book aside while she's recovering. And then I have a New Orleans source who is, she's Creole, and she's helping me with that culture and everything. And as opposed to my science fiction, it's like I can sit down and write my science fiction and pull it out pretty quickly. This is taking years because of all the research, all of the sourcing, because you're not just doing the book research, you're doing the cultural research, and it's been a fascinating project, but it's also kind of slow and frustrating.
Well, I am working on the time travel book, obviously. That's my front burner project at the moment. But I also have the third book in my Western series, which I am trying to finish and get out. So it's a Western series set in Wyoming in the late 19th century with a trans male hero. So that's what I'm working on.
I see Susanna asked when I wrote 300 Rains. I initially wrote it as part of NaNoWriMo in 2008. And after doing a lot of research of what was available in 2008. And I have heard about writing the other, which she also mentions, except I didn't know about that until 2012 or 13. So it was not really as much of an option then. I just knew I didn't want to treat any of the people involved, which includes aspects of the government in Brazil. Because when I mentioned FUNAI, that is it's an acronym for the branch of the Brazilian government that takes care of tribal groups. And they are problematic from what I've heard from most people.
Oh, yeah, I'll check that out. The whole Muskogee element of my story. Now I'm part I'm heavily acculturated to Comanche and Nez Perce per se. You can see I'm very white, but I'm maybe first generation off the reservation. And then my son-in-law is Hupa, and so my grandchildren are Hupa tribal members. And I wrote this character because I wanted to write a character that felt like me, which is somebody that's liminal, you know, it's between cultures. And so this character, he's between everything. He's not English, he's not Muskogee, he's not really American, but he is. He's a lawyer, but because he's part Native American, he's not really safe in his position as a lawyer. And the thing with Native American cultures is there are hundreds of them, and everyone is different. And so I was really fortunate that one of my friends on Facebook, she and her husband are Muskogee elders, and I didn't realize that. And I was just talking to her online today, and then she's like, "Well, you can talk to me," and so it was really fortunate. And like I said, she did have a stroke, and so I set that side of that element of the story aside and moved on to the Civil War aspect of it. And so I'll be going back. But no, that's a valuable resource because when I first started writing, you know, everybody would casually write a character of another culture, another race, another religion, and not necessarily reach out to sensitivity readers, and that is important. And so, you know, as writers, we're learning all the time. You know, it's a continual, like I said, you know, 10 years ago when I started, nobody would have thought of doing that. They would have cracked open a book rather than reach out to a friend or to a sensitivity reader and say, you know, how do you feel when somebody says that? You know, read my book. What does that make you feel? What does it make you think? Where am I wrong? What can I do better? So thank you. It's a good resource.
Well, remember people, all our books are in the Rainbow Space Magic store. And I guess, you know, from me, thank you for coming to the reading. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.